Vaigiji Ka Khalsa, Vaigiji Ki Fateh. You're listening to Right to Believe, a podcast where we explore how faith, law, and human dignity intersect in today's Canada. I'm your host, Prabhjot Kaur, and today's conversation is not just timely, it's essential. We are at a critical crossroads. Quebec's Bill 21, a law that bars public employees from wearing religious symbols, is now heading to the Supreme Court of Canada. For Sikhs, Muslim, Jewish professionals, and people of faith across the country, this is more than just a policy. It's about our right to exist fully, to contribute to society without having to strip parts of ourselves to do so. Joining us today is someone who's been fighting this battle legally, morally, and publicly. Balpreet Singh, Legal Counsel for the World Sikh Organization of Canada. Balpreet Virji, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Virji, let's start from the root. For our listeners, especially the youth who may not know what Bill 21 is, can you go a little bit into detail around what it is? And more importantly, what message does this law send to a Sikh teacher or a Muslim woman in a hijab or a Jewish person wearing a kippah?
So Bill 21 was passed in 2019, and it was passed by the current government. And the aim of the bill is to restrict religious symbols from the public space, specifically for people in positions of authority or power. So this was principals, teachers, police officers, judges, government lawyers. So anyone in a so-called position of authority, Quebec has legislated that it will not be allowed for them to wear religious symbols. And this would be a clear violation of the charter. But they've used Section 33, which is called the Notwithstanding Clause. So the Notwithstanding Clause allows governments to suspend charter rights to get around them for 5 years, and you can renew it after a 5-year term. So basically, this means that people that wear the stars or in other communities, hijabs or kippahs, whatever it is, cannot work in those jobs.
Thank you. Do you think this law was always meant to target certain communities more than others, or was it a veiled way of policing identity, especially visible minorities?
So the source of this is actually the Muslim community and antagonism towards the Muslim community. The way this started was originally a backlash against the niqab. So the niqab is the Muslim face covering that covers everything except the eyes. And the first attempt in Quebec was around 2010. To ban the wearing of the niqab. And our position has always been that while as Sikhs we don't agree with the wearing of the niqab, that if someone claims this is a religious practice and it's not harming anyone, then they should be able to do it, because we know that compromising on religious freedoms will eventually come back to us. So we stood against it in 2010, and then that actually resulted in the Quran being banned in 2010 from the Quebec National Assembly, which is a story of its own. But what we saw after that was a proposed charter of secularism, which would have expanded that ban to all religious symbols, and finally Bill 21. But at the base of it, it's really an attempt at targeting the Muslim community, which is it's political. It's for votes. So ostensibly, it targets all articles of faith and religious symbols, but the real target is the Muslim community.
Thank you. WSO has been involved since day one. Could you walk us through not only the legal journey, but the emotional weight of this case? And what stories have you heard from affected individuals?
So in terms of affected individuals, at that time, our president for Quebec was Amrit Kaur. And Amrit Kaur had just completed her teaching degree in June 2019. So just as this law came into effect, her ability to teach in Quebec was taken away. So teachers who were already wearing religious symbols prior to the passing of this law, they've been grandfathered in, which means that they can continue to wear them until they leave their jobs. But no new hires can wear these. So Amrit Kaur, who once again was someone who grew up in Quebec, who wore the star, she had to make a choice. And she chose her faith. And so she was forced to leave Quebec, and she moved to British Columbia to pursue teaching. But really the impact on Quebec society is very severe, because when the state says that these religious symbols are not permitted, that is basically a permission for the rest of society to also crack down, whether it's these positions of authority, but we've seen impacts on people working jobs that would not come under Bill 21, well, bus drivers, et cetera, et cetera. So we were involved at the very first level, and we brought the case on behalf of Prabhjot Kaur as well as the World Sikh Organization of Canada. So we are a party, and we were interveners at the first level, and we've become appellants at the subsequent levels.
Thank you. From your vantage point as legal counsel, how are you preparing for the upcoming Supreme Court hearing, and what are some of the strongest constitutional challenges that can be made even with the use of the notwithstanding clause?
So the notwithstanding clause is really like the nuclear option. Governments use it because they know there's very little anyone can do to challenge it. So we've seen other parties try and use the equality guarantees because the notwithstanding clause doesn't apply to Section 15, which is equality. But it hasn't been so successful. So at the first level, the Superior Court level, the court said that the scope of Bill 21 would be limited and that it would not apply to the English School Board, which has a right, constitutional right to run their schools as they see fit, like minority rights. It also would not apply to people who've been elected. So if you have someone wearing a hijab or the dastar that's elected to sit in the Legislative Assembly, that it would not apply to them. But our argument has always been a little bit novel. So we haven't relied on the charter. Our legal team, and we've given this case to Davies, which is one of Canada's leading law firms. Our case is around the 1852 Act. And this is something that is very old, but it protected religious rights. And what we're saying is that the charter came obviously in 1982 afterwards, but it doesn't erase the 1852 Act. And if you can get around religious rights in the charter using the notwithstanding clause, then we're saying to the court that you should look at the 1852 Act and the protections within it for religious freedoms and say that these never went away, that they were sort of lost in history, but it never went away. It gives the court an argument that they can use without having to go to the charter. So it is a little bit unique, but sometimes you have to give courts unique arguments in order for them to make decisions that are difficult to make.
Thank you. Let's talk about identity. You've often said this case isn't just legal, it's existential. What does it do to a child whose parents are being told you can't be a teacher because of your dastar?
So Quebec has told Sikhs that they are not welcome or included if they wear the stars or articles of faith. And Quebec's understanding of religion is not our understanding of religion. So for them, religion is something that stays in the home, and that if you come into the public sphere, you should be stripped of your religion. And that really doesn't make any sense for us as Sikhs, because for us, everything is the same. Everything is one. So whoever we are inside the home is the same we are outside the home. And frankly speaking, that makes sense. So if you look at this judge that they're so concerned about, if they have religious thinking at home and they're wearing a religious symbol, then do you really think that their religious thinking is going to go away when they take off their religious symbol? It doesn't make any sense. It's like the ostrich that's putting its head in the sand, that because I can't see it, it doesn't exist. So for us, this is artificial. So if someone's got that thinking, then the thinking is not going to go away. It's just that maybe you won't have to see it. So that's why for us, this is a real challenge. And what we're seeing is, like I said, this law by the government is giving permission to people on the streets to discriminate, to hate, to other. And it was really sad for me when I was in Quebec not too long ago. I had a young man and their father come up to me, and the father said, "Can you speak with my son?" I said, "What's wrong?" And he was wearing a parka and he had his head down, and he goes, "He doesn't have confidence. He lacks self-confidence." I go, "Why is that?" He goes, "Because he's always afraid that when he goes outside, people are going to make fun of him or get into fights with him and make fun of his dastar or his parka." And that for me was really sad, that our community has been so othered that the option is to either live in fear and in shame, and in Punjab we call that gulami, or you can leave and you could go some other place in Canada, and many have done that, right? Like Gurbaj Singh Multani, who had the famous Multani case, the Kirpan case at the Supreme Court. He lived in Quebec, and we know that he's moved out. And there's a number of other young people who have made that hard decision, but others who continue to live there are living in a situation that's really difficult. And I'll finish with this. We did our anti-Sikh hate study, And we focused in on respondents from Quebec, and we found something really interesting. So those that live in Quebec are told that speak French, try and fit in. And we found that those who spoke French, 89% reported facing anti-Sikh hate. And of those who didn't speak French, it was like 63 or 65%. So that what that means is that if you're trying to speak to people, that actually makes you more of a subject of hate. And if you can't speak with people, either you can't understand what they're saying, or you're just not interacting, so they're not saying anything to you, but it's the opposite. So I think Quebec has a real problem on its hands. There is racism and xenophobia that runs very deep, and that's obviously a problem for my community, but this will come in very negative forms for that society, and it will cause problems for them eventually.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing the stories. Some people say if you want to live in Quebec, just follow their rules. But isn't that a dangerous oversimplification? Isn't the promise of Canada supposed to be that you don't have to trade your faith for citizenship?
Well, that's it. So what is Canada? Canada, by default, has been a country that welcomes multiculturalism. It's not a melting pot. It has always been that you can keep who you are and you will be welcomed. And the charter was supposed to be guarantees that you will not be forced to choose between your faith and your job or something like that. But when it comes to Quebec, they've made a clear choice that you will have to choose between your faith and living in that society. And if you live in that society and continue to wear these articles of faith, then you will be at best a second-class citizen. So for us, that's intolerable, because if this is something that Quebec can do, and the Supreme Court of Canada doesn't say that this isn't allowed and doesn't strike this law, then eventually the same model could be used in other provinces. Other provinces could say, well, we want to do what's similar. And then where does that really leave us? So for us, this isn't what Canada was supposed to be.
Thank you. Would it be fair to say that laws like this don't promote neutrality, they promote invisibility? That minorities are being told, be less of who you are to be accepted here?
So what does this law actually do? It just forces religion to go underground. And, the goal of this law is laïcité, which is supposed to be secularism. But what's secularism? It means that no religion is favored or disfavored. So just because of your faith, you will not face discrimination, and you will not be given a bonus or a promotion just because of who you are in terms of your faith. This isn't that. So Sikhs who are teachers living in other provinces, we have never heard of a Sikh receiving a promotion because they're wearing a dastar. And at the same time, we've never heard of any issues, whether that's Sikh teachers trying to convert kids or anything like that. It's an artificial problem. But what this is doing is saying that no, these are second-class citizens and that you are disfavored. So it's actually the opposite of secularism. It is discrimination. So it is not neutral at all. And following the law, I think you can create unjust laws and then expecting people to follow them or respect them. That's unreasonable. I mean, we've seen unjust laws across the world. So tomorrow, Quebec passes a law that no people who are of X color can enter our legislature. Well, maybe you can justify it legally, but morally it's indefensible.
Thank you. Let's take a step back. This isn't the only human rights issue Sikhs in Canada are facing. Shaheed Bhai Hardeep Singh Nijjar's assassination sent shockwaves not only through the Sikh community, but globally. As a legal advocate, how did that moment hit you?
It was something that Bhai Hardeep Singh knew was coming, and I think, sadly, a lot of us knew was coming as well. India has been very active in Canada for the past 40 plus years, and attempts at attacking our community, attempts at marginalizing us, silencing us have been ongoing, and the governments, whether that was liberal governments or conservative governments, have conveniently ignored it. So for us, it was really a moment for us to reflect that so many Sikhs left Punjab, left India, because they were prosecuted, persecuted. And if India can now do these sort of crimes in Canada, then where are we safe? And does our government not have a role in protecting us? But I mean, we saw that Justin Trudeau in September 2023 got up in Parliament and made that bold statement that India is linked to this assassination. And after that, we have seen announcements that India is linked to crime, targeting over a dozen Sikh activists here. There's multiple murders, at least 4 or 5 murders that have taken place. Links to the terrorist Bishnoi gang. Amit Shah, who is the Home Minister and the right-hand man of Prime Minister Modi, has been personally named by Canadian government officials as orchestrating and ordering this violence. But what we've seen under Carney is that things have turned around. And once again, the way we feel in Quebec about second-class citizenship, that's what we're starting to feel in the rest of Canada. So these narratives that are coming out of India, and the Foreign Interference Commission has found that India is a prolific source of interference in Canada, transnational oppression. And the Commission also found that disinformation is one of the biggest threats to Canadian sovereignty. And what we're seeing is that India continues its transnational oppression, and our government under Carney is not willing to stand up against it. And we're seeing this growing disinformation. So talk around Khalistan is marred by this orchestrated campaign to say that it's drugs, extremism, so that members of our community, parents, they say, we can't talk about this. We don't want our kids talking about this. But Bhai Hardeep Singh Shahidi was a symbol for us that you can kill us, but you can't silence us. So that's what it means for me.
Thank you. So going back to what you were saying about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he stood up in Parliament and he said there were credible allegations linking Indian state actors to a murder on Canadian soil. How should Canadians interpret that, especially in light of Modi being invited to platforms like G7?
Well, it was the truth.
Yeah.
If we look at Prime Minister Trudeau, he had a history with India. So in 2018, he traveled to India, and his entire trip was sabotaged by Indian interference. Like it was set up to fail. Yeah. And he knew that. So when he saw this, he knew that he couldn't just let it go, that the right thing to do was to stand up and call it out. Yeah. I'm not saying Trudeau has done everything right. Like there were a number of things that I would suggest that he messed up. Even that news article that said that in 2017, the government had information about India targeting Sikhs in Canada, but they didn't action it because they didn't want to cause problems for their 2018 trip. Clearly, that was a mistake. But, credit to him, he did what had to be done after Hardeep Singh's assassination. But the way things have transformed under Carney, that's disturbing. So one government can call it out, can name names, and then a subsequent government just months later can brush it all under the carpet. And before, we were living under the misapprehension that people just don't know what happens to Sikhs in Punjab. People don't know what the Indian government does. But now we've got this dilemma that now that people know and they still don't care, where does that leave us? And for me, that points to the fact that we've got to be our advocates. We shouldn't be looking anywhere else for anyone else to stand up for us. That it's great if someone does, but don't expect it, and don't think that even if someone does, that it's going to be a lasting effect. I think we've got a lot of work to do within our own community to build our strength and be able to advocate for ourselves and to determine our own future, to make our own narratives, to define our own terms. And that takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of strength, and it takes fearlessness. And once again, looking at what Bhai Hardeep Singh did, he knew this was coming and he didn't back down. And that's, for me, once again, an inspiration.
Thank you. Let's talk about foreign interference. There's a growing fear that Sikh Canadians, especially vocal ones, are being surveilled, intimidated, or even harmed. What's your advice to activists, and what can the government do to actually protect us?
Well, that's not new. People that have spoken about Khalistan have been surveilled, have been harassed, have been threatened for, once again, 40 plus years. What has changed, perhaps, is the fact that the Indian government is willing to action that in terms of assassinations. So we saw just a few weeks ago Bhai Maninder Singh receive a 4th duty to warn, and this time it was extended to his wife and children. And that goes to the depravity of the Indian state. That's not just Sikh activists, it's their families. And that is, once again, not surprising. What we saw in Punjab during the 80s and 90s was that the Indian government was willing to target non-combatants, was willing to even kill babies. It was ruthless, it was brutal, and we remember it. But once again, the world just doesn't care, doesn't matter. But that's not something that should affect us. We need to have that memory. We need to give that memory to our kids. So what should our activists do here? I think we have to be guided by our principles. We have to be guided by our history. So our history teaches us that no matter what, stick to your principles, and your victory is in sticking to those principles. That it doesn't matter if, in my generation, Khalistan is formed, or if Khalistan is formed in my kid's generation, or grandkids. It doesn't matter if it's 10 generations. But having that standing up for the dream of a place where Sikhs and all people can live with dignity, with freedom, that's something that is a responsibility on all of us. And the consequences, I would argue that the consequences for the vast majority of people are not going to be significant. If all Sikhs stood up and say, we want this, we have a right to have our own self-determination and our own state, India can't kill all of us. I mean, it might want to pretend it can, but it certainly can't. Even in terms of visa denials, there are hundreds of thousands of people that voted in the Khalistan referendum. Not all of them can be denied visas. I mean, India may try whatever it wants. So my suggestion is be fearless, stand up for what's right, and have bharosa. I mean, we are Sikhs at the end of the day. This isn't just an ethno-nationalist movement. It's not. It is fundamentally a dharmic movement. It is based out of Sikhi, and if we believe that Guru Sahib is Ang Sang, then he will take care of all of these things. So we move forward with that bharosa in Guru Sahib that if we stand up for what's right, then Guru Sahib will stand behind us.
Thank you. Do you believe there's enough political will in Canada to take stand when international diplomacy clashes with domestic human rights?
Clearly not. Like we've seen that Carney, before his recent trip to India, a government official actually said it was laughable that India is no longer involved in foreign interference and transnational oppression. Like it was a bald lie. Why this government official said it? I mean, we could speculate, but I don't think he was just, speaking off the cuff. I think that he had a goal of softening Carney's landing so that India welcomes him and doesn't raise this as an issue. They know that India screwed up Trudeau's trip because he took, he wasn't cracking down on so-called Sikh extremists, basically people that are talking about Khalistan. So, we see the loyal opposition. I mean, the opposition's job is to challenge the government, basically on everything. Even when they do the right thing, they challenge the government. But if you look at the India file, the Conservative Party has not challenged a single thing. In fact, they've probably said that they are not moving fast enough to repair ties with India. So that leaves us with, limited choices. The NDP have actually been very principled. I mean, the fact is that the NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, was targeted by India. I mean, just think about it, like a foreign government targeting a Canadian political leader and no consequences. So I'm glad the NDP have stuck to their guns, but there is very little appetite in Canada to challenge India. And that's been the case for 40 years, but particularly in light of the Trump tariffs and the changing dynamic in the world, countries are sort of holding their nose and saying, we've got to do this with India. But for Carney, it's been completely unprincipled. Like he's completely capitulated. It's been shameful.
Thank you. Some people misunderstand religious freedom. They think it just means being allowed to worship, but it goes beyond that. It's about living fully, practicing your faith, and participating equally in public life. Can you explain why this is so much deeper than just symbolism?
So this isn't symbolism for us. This is who we are. We come as a package. And once again, we believe in Bibig, which means oneness of everything. So my personal life and my public life are linked. You can create these artificial divisions. And in the West, they have, divisions between state and church, between my personal life and my public life. But practically speaking, they're artificial. No one in their right mind would believe that you can partition your brain in this way. There was actually a case at the Supreme Court that we intervened in several years ago. It would have been 2014, 13, something like that. It was called Loyola. And this was a case out of Quebec where a Catholic high school was told to teach their religious curriculum in a secular manner. So they said, at the Supreme Court level, they said anyways, that we can do other religions neutrally, but we can't teach our own faith neutrally. And the government said that no, for that one period, you've got to be secular. You've got to be teaching in a balanced, neutral way about Catholicism. We intervened as WSO to say that you can't, it's like a fiction. You can't be neutral for one period of the day. Like, you are who you are. And the court agreed with that. But what we have, once again, is that artificial division that Quebec is pushing, and many seem to agree that, well, why can't you practice this in your own homes? Well, I am who I am, and I'm not going to strip my identity. And the gods are not something, once again, that we can ever just let go of. So how do we fit in Canada? And if this is something that the Canadian government's not willing to stand up for, if the court's not willing to say this is wrong, then that leaves us with a real problem, existential problem, which is, and I've said this many times before, Prabhjot Kaur in his, one of his final speeches said that for every immigrant, there comes a day in their lives when their kids are coming home and they're saying, the other kids are making fun of me, and they're saying, go back home. Where's home? And we as Sikhs have to ask, where is home? Like, if we cannot practice our faith here fully, then where are we going to go? If we have to choose between our jobs and our faith, I'd like to think that I'd pick my faith, but then where do I go? Can't go back to India. I don't have a home there. So I think for us, all of this is linked in the sense that we have to create a home for ourselves. And that's not something I can say, once again, it'll take one generation or two generations. It could take hundreds of years. But it's something that if we don't work on, it'll never happen. And that's absolutely essential. We've got to make a home for ourselves, and if not for ourselves, then for our oncoming generations.
Thank you. How does Bill 21 and the silence around it in some political circles betray the multicultural promise of Canada?
Well, Bill 21 should have been a national crisis, stripping people of their rights to practice their religion. I mean, our country was founded on this freedom, that you will not be forced to give up your religion. But because governments don't want to alienate Quebec, there's a nationalist independence movement there. So they step on eggshells when it comes to Quebec. They don't want to offend Quebec or create a perception that Canada is forcing anything on them, which might result in stronger support for sovereignty or independence. But for me, once again, this is not a principled thing to do. Like, doing nothing is not the solution. And basically, we've seen our government do nothing. And even Carney, like, during his election, maybe that should have been an indication to us of who he is and what his politics is like. But when he was asked about Bill 21, he didn't condemn it. Even Pierre Poilievre spoke against it. But, I mean, if you can't condemn this blatant discrimination, then what do you stand for? I mean, all you stand for is the dollar.
Thank you. What would it mean for Sikhs and all Canadians if the Supreme Court does not strike down Bill 21?
Well, that would send a message to us that our religion, our faith, is contingent on the permission of governments. That governments, on a whim, can decide that you are not allowed to practice your faith anymore. And where does that leave us? Once again, it goes back to the same question. We have nowhere to go. We have nowhere where we can securely say, I have a right to practice my faith. Right now in Canada, we were under the misapprehension that we had a right. And if the court does not strike this, it means we don't have that right anywhere. And in fact, we could lose that right in other places as well.
Thank you. I want to speak directly to the Sikh youth listening right now, the kids growing up in Brampton, Surrey, Montreal, or Halifax tying their dastar every morning. What would you tell them about why this moment matters and why they need to stay engaged?
My first suggestion is to make sure you know why you're tying your dastar. For someone who doesn't have that knowledge of Sikhi or that practice of Sikhi, the practice of Sikhi is very important, that spiritual practice, because that's where you get your strength from. But if you don't have that, then looking different is a liability. You don't know why you look different. You don't know what the value is in looking different. And frankly, it's a source of self-hate. So we as a community need to create those institutions and those mechanisms for our kids to connect with Sikhi and to connect with their identity and to know, to feel that pride, because there's so much history that goes behind our right to wear the dastar, so much pride. And if someone understands that, then there really aren't those same sort of challenges that they face. But I would suggest that this is a time to stand up. So, I mean, Sikhs have been here for over 100 years. Um, we have a long history here, and we've contributed to this country. We aren't here as a favor to anyone. So when we see this rising anti-Sikh hate, when we see these sort of discriminatory laws, don't become disheartened, become active. Like, that doesn't mean retreat, that means engage. So how do you engage? That could be politically, it could mean socially, it could mean, even with WSO. But this isn't the time to be laid back and, woe is me. This is the time to do something.
Thank you. How can everyday people support the work WSO is doing, and what role can students, professionals, and elders play in this legal and spiritual battle?
That's a great question. In terms of supporting WSO, I mean, the easiest way is financially. And we all give this one, and we should be supporting third-party advocacy organizations. In terms of WSO, like, what we do is not copied by any other Sikh institution. Like, we're involved in education, we're involved in social work, legal work. So, I mean, supporting WSO financially, that's easiest. But we have all kinds of ways for people to get involved. We have programs that you can get involved with, a Sikh mentorship program, a Sikh Youth Leadership Institute. But even if it's not with WSO, just get involved. Like we're seeing in our Gurdwara. And I'm not saying it's easy to operate in a Gurdwara space, but the young generation is not stepping up to take over the management of Gurdwara. And I mean, that's a two-sided thing. Our management has to think why, but our young people also have to say, we have to sacrifice our time. Like, we have to actually invest in our institutions in order to get the return. So just being active. It's too easy to be passive.
Yeah, thank you. In Sikh history, we faced Mughal emperors, British colonialists, and genocidal state violence, but we've always stood because truth is our banner and Chardi Kala is our mindset. Do you believe that the Panth is ready for the next phase of resistance in courtrooms, in parliament, and in the heart of Canadians?
So the battle for me is primarily in the hearts of the community. But when we look at the other forms of advocacy, you'll know that our organization worked very hard for a very long time to put Sikhs into prominent positions, whether it was politically or otherwise. But I wouldn't say that was a fully successful experiment, because unless you have someone that has those Sikh values, fully understands, fully engages with them, just putting someone in that position doesn't mean that they're going to be able to do anything in terms of the community. And we're not looking for favors or people to do favoritism towards our community when they're in those positions. But they should be able to advocate for our community. I mean, we are a part of the Canadian mosaic. Like, that's why you're there, in part at least. So unless we have Sikhs that are connected with the faith in the proper way, they're not afraid. Because this gulami that I'm talking about, insecurity, silence, shame, it's insidious. Like, it affects all of us that are living here. I just tell this one example that, when many of us, even myself, we go to a store, we might start speaking just so that people know that we can speak English just like them, so that they'll treat us as equals, that won't treat us as, this new guy and, dismiss us. Why is that? Why do I have to prove myself to get equal treatment? But that gulami actually results in self-hate and insecurity, and someone in that position that is affected by that is not able to do anything. So for me, the first battle is in our own hearts. And then unless you're comfortable with yourself, you can't expect other people to be comfortable with you. So that's something that will follow.
Thank you. So Virji, your clarity, courage, and commitment to justice is truly inspiring. Thank you for being a light in a time where so many people feel like they're walking through shadows. To our listeners, the right to believe, to express, and to exist is not just a privilege, it's a birthright. And it's a right we must never stop defending. Please support the World Sikh Organization, whether it's through donations, volunteering, or simply educating yourself. You can't build a just country by asking people to erase themselves. This has been Right to Believe. Vaigu Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaigu Ji Ki Fateh.